Yeah.
Two guys, one ballot, where two ordinary dudes talk about one thing that's going on your ballot this November. Today, it's part of our special series called Ballot to the Future!
Woo! Today's episode is about Prop 115, the 22-week abortion ban, which you'll see on your ballot in November.
Shira, let's talk about this 22-week abortion ban. Tell me, what does this bill do? If you vote yes and this bill gets approved, what's going to happen?
So if you vote yes on Prop 115, it will make it illegal for doctors in this state to perform an abortion after 22 weeks of pregnancy, which is about 5.5 months.
What if the mother, what if there's rape, or if the mother's life is in danger or anything like that?
Yeah, there's only one exception in this bill that would allow a doctor to perform an abortion and not be criminalized, and that's if the mother's health is immediately in danger. But there are no exceptions for rape, for incest, for the particular status of the fetus health-wise, if it has a missing lungs or missing organs. There are no other exceptions, just the health of the mother.
Got it. So in that regard, this is pretty strict.
Very strict, and in fact I said health of the mother, but it's really just immediate life-saving of the mother. So other health-related conditions of the mother are also not allowed as an exception.
Is this common? Do other states have this?
So Colorado is one of 7 states that allows abortion after 22 weeks. So many other states do have bans at 22 weeks or later for abortion.
Where does this date 22 weeks come from?
Yeah, it comes from the viability of a fetus and whether it can survive out of the womb and out of the mother's body. There aren't instances of fetuses surviving before 22 weeks. So this is the point at which it has been statistically possible, not always deterministically so, but possible for a fetus to survive.
Only the mother's life is at danger. What happens if a doctor were to perform the abortion at 23 weeks and this gets passed?
The doctor would be fined anywhere from $500 to $5,000. He or she would be charged with a misdemeanor, and their license would most likely be taken away. So it is criminalizing the act of the medical procedure. It would be illegal.
Illegal for the doctor, but not for the patient.
Correct. Just the doctor is going to be punished.
That's pretty interesting, because if I was the patient, I would just go across state lines if I was really determined to do this, right?
Yeah, and that's a part of the history of abortion in this country that we know really well. It's not just that patients travel far distances to seek a medically necessary procedure, but they actually often just go underground, and you have doctors who have, or people who aren't even doctors offering the procedure. And often when you criminalize abortion, you end up having very unsafe procedures happening all across the state and all across the country.
So I guess we're going into the pros and cons of this, or the opposing sides and the 4 sides. The opposing sides would say, hey, when you raise the threshold, really you're just pushing this into the black market where it's less safe, it's less regulated.
Far more dangerous to the mother, which is interesting since that's one of the exceptions in this bill.
What are other arguments that people would pose that would say this is just bad policy, and maybe I'll take the other side and try to say here's why some people might think this is good policy?
One you already stated, which is really clear that when you criminalize medical procedures that are for the well-being of the mother or the child or the family, you just see people doing them anyway, in very dangerous conditions, very unhealthy conditions. The second one is if you look at the bill itself, like you said, it's very restrictive, only giving one exception. And we know with health-related things, it's a very complex dynamic in our bodies, why certain things would be needed or not. And so to only have the one restriction really makes this pretty inhumane. So even if you are in favor, I think, of a late-term abortion ban, as it's called, or a 22-week abortion ban, you might want to see a law in the books in Colorado that would allow, at least for other exceptions, either because of rape or incest or other reasons about the status of the fetus, that for medical reasons, an abortion would be needed at 22 weeks.
Well, I did interview briefly one OBGYN and said, hey, do you do these abortions? Does this happen? When do they happen? And she said in her career, she's only performed 2 of these, and both were in an instance where the fetus would be born with basically no skeletal system, or such a genetic condition where the baby's bones would get crushed like as soon as a doctor would hold it or something like that.
Very extreme medical reasons.
Yeah, so it was pretty off-putting to me when I saw that this bill wouldn't give any medical exceptions for the child, only for the mother.
But there's really nothing to stop these groups from continuously putting additional bills on the ballot that restrict it at 20 weeks or 16 or even before. The proponents of the bill are definitely known to be people that are not pro-abortion. This is not a bill to save women's lives. This is a bill to restrict abortion access. Logic
Dictates that as technology improves, the viability of a fetus would become earlier and earlier. So eventually, would you just move that date back earlier and earlier? And theoretically, 50 years from now, you'd have abortion illegal based on the perspective that
robots could take care of a fetus at 2 weeks. Right. The last reason, though, Sasha, and I think this is really the most important one, and I think it gets it outside of the realm of pro-life or pro-choice or women's rights or not women's rights. And I think it's important for us to look at this bill in that bigger picture, which is privacy and the Fourth Amendment, and whether we believe that it is the right place for the government to be policing our health and our medical decisions between us and our doctors.
Yeah, so I guess this is a Fourth Amendment question for a lot of people, which is, what is the right of privacy? What data do you want the provider or anyone really to be forced to give to government? And in this case, it would be the time at which inception occurred or something like that, right?
Correct, right. This would, in order to criminalize the doctors that would be performing these abortions, right, releasing the records of the date at which I became pregnant and the date at which I elected to have an abortion.
There's a pretty strong opposition to this bill. The opposition has raised, I think, 20 times more money than the for side. But, it's interesting to think, who is the for side of this bill? And from my research, it's about who you would expect. It's generally pro-life organizations, religious or pseudo-religious organizations, and they make a pretty straightforward argument. They say that if a fetus is viable, then as a society, it's our obligation to see that fetus all the way through to birth, and if the mother at that point doesn't want the child should be put up for adoption, and the state should have facilities to manage that.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said just pretty much points out that if you think abortion itself should be illegal, this is a bill that's in line with that viewpoint.
Shira, so how are you going to vote for this thing?
I think that I will definitely be voting against this bill. I don't want the state policing my medical decisions, and I don't think it's good for our constitutional privacy rights.
Yeah, I'm also going to be voting no on this. My rationale is that if the proponents of this were truly interested in society's benefit and the well-being of the family, there would be way more exceptions allowed. We wouldn't really be criminalizing the doctor, and there would be a bunch of safeguards around this that this just doesn't have. So this bill doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree.